14 October 1942, the North Atlantic, roughly 700 kilometers west of Ireland. The water is black and heaving, the sky the color of an old bruise. Somewhere below the chop, three long shadows glide in formation, silent, patient, invisible. On the surface, Convoy SC-104 pushes eastward, 47 merchant vessels laden with oil, grain, and war materiel. Their escort is thin, their confidence misplaced. At 23:17, the first torpedo strikes the American freighter Ashworth. By dawn, 7 ships are gone. By the end of the week, 15 vessels will lie on the ocean floor. And the men who sank them did not operate alone, did not attack at random, and did not retreat after the first kill. They coordinated, they communicated, they hunted. This is not a story about one submarine or one captain. It is a story about a system, a method of naval warfare so effective that the Allies spent 3 desperate years trying to understand it, copy it, and ultimately destroy it. This is the story of the Rudeltaktik, the wolf pack. By the spring of 1940, the German Kriegsmarine faced a problem that was on paper insurmountable. Britain depended on her Atlantic convoys for survival, some 60 million tons of imports annually, including nearly half of all food consumed on the island. Sever that lifeline, and the war was won without a single boot placed on British soil. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz understood this with a clarity that bordered on obsession. But the U-boat fleet was small, desperately so. In September 1939, Germany possessed just 57 operational submarines, of which fewer than half were ocean-going Type 7s capable of sustained Atlantic patrols. Even as production accelerated, losses mounted. A single submarine attacking a convoy alone faced appalling odds. Convoy escorts, destroyers, sloops, corvettes could prosecute a submerged contact for hours. ASTIC, the British hydrophone system, could detect a submerged U-boat from over a kilometer away under ideal conditions. A lone wolf had perhaps one attack run before the hunters turned on it. The arithmetic was merciless. Against a convoy of 40 ships protected by 6 or 8 escorts, one submarine might sink 2 or 3 vessels before being driven off or destroyed. To reliably overwhelm an escort screen, to saturate its response capacity, to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously, that required not one submarine, it required many, and it required them to act together. The existing solution, individual patrols, independent attacks, was producing results that were insufficient. Donitz calculated he needed to sink 700,000 tons of Allied shipping per month to starve Britain into submission. Single submarines, working alone, could never reach that figure. The concept had existed since the First World War, proposed by German naval theorists as early as 1917. But it was Donitz, working from his headquarters first at Lorient and later at the Villa Carillon, who transformed the theory into operational doctrine. The Rudeltaktik, literally pack tactics, functioned in 3 distinct phases. First, a patrol line. Submarines were positioned in a long chain across the expected convoy route, sometimes stretching 200 kilometers, each boat separated from the next by roughly 20 to 30 kilometers. They waited submerged by day, surfacing at night to recharge batteries and maintain radio contact. When a convoy was sighted, typically by a lone U-boat on the perimeter, the sighting boat did not immediately attack. This was the crucial departure from previous doctrine. Instead, it transmitted a contact report to BDU, the U-boat command in occupied France, giving position, course, and speed. It then shadowed the convoy at a safe distance, transmitting homing signals on a continuous loop. These signals, short, rhythmic radio pulses, guided the other boats in the pack toward the target. A Type 7 U-boat on the surface could make 17 knots in calm conditions, fast enough to intercept a convoy making 8 or 9 knots. Within 12 to 24 hours, 3, 5, 8 U-boats might converge on a single convoy. The attack that followed was coordinated but not synchronized. Each captain chose his own moment, his own angle, his own target. The result was chaos for the escort commander, who faced simultaneous torpedo attacks from multiple bearings, unable to prosecute more than 1 or 2 contacts at a time. The Type CC, the workhorse of the Wolfpack, measured 67 meters in length and displaced 817 tons submerged. It carried 14 torpedoes, 4 bow tubes, 1 stern, and could remain on patrol roughly 8 weeks. Its surface speed was adequate. Its submerged endurance, at slow speed, extended to roughly 80 hours. It was not a revolutionary vessel. The system it operated within was. The results in the autumn of 1942 were catastrophic for the Allies. During what German submariners would call the Glückliche Zeit, the happy time, Wolfpacks operating in the mid-Atlantic gap beyond the reach of land-based air cover tore through convoy after convoy. In November 1942 alone, 119 Allied ships were lost, totaling over 800,000 tons. Donitz had, briefly, reached his target figure. SC-104 was one of dozens of convoys mauled that season. The pack responsible, designated Wotan by the Germans, comprised 8 submarines at its peak. 3 made the initial attacks. The others converged over the following 48 hours, drawn in by homing signals that the convoy's radio operators could hear but could not suppress. Survivors' accounts, those few that were recovered from lifeboats in October seas, described the experience in terms that had little to do with military precision. A ship ahead simply vanishing in a column of flame. The sound of a second explosion before the first had finished reverberating. Escort commanders turning toward one bearing only to receive a damage report from the opposite quarter. The psychological impact on merchant crews was severe and documented. Men who survived one Wolfpack attack frequently refused further Atlantic service. Those who continued often did so in a state of controlled terror that their commanders noted but could do little to address. Records of the specific psychological assessments conducted in Liverpool in late 1942 remain partially classified, though accounts from surviving merchant officers speak plainly enough. The Americans, when they entered the war in December 1941, had observed the Wolfpack's effectiveness for 2 years. Their response, initially, was to dismiss the threat. American naval doctrine emphasized individual submarine operations, a legacy of Pacific strategy, and coordination between boats was considered impractical over the vast distances involved. One American naval assessment from early 1942, later declassified, concluded bluntly that convoy, escort, and hunter-killer group operations are more efficiently prosecuted by single vessels with clear operational independence. The Wolfpack concept was judged too complex, too reliant on radio communication, and too dependent on the kind of centralized tactical control that American naval culture resisted. The British had no such prejudice, but they had a different problem. They had no Wolfpacks of their own to deploy. British submarine doctrine focused on coastal and Mediterranean operations. The Royal Navy's hunter-killer groups, frigates and sloops, working in coordinated teams, were the closest Allied equivalent, and they were effective, but they were reacting to a problem, not matching it in kind. German Wolfpacks sank more tonnage per boat deployed than any other submarine system in the war. In the peak months of 1942, a single Type 7C participating in pack operations sank, on average, 3 to 4 times as much tonnage as a comparable Allied submarine operating independently. The mathematics of coordination had proven themselves entirely. The Wolfpack era ended not because the concept failed, but because the conditions that made it possible were systematically dismantled. Very long-range consolidated B-24 Liberator aircraft closed the mid-Atlantic gap in the spring of 1943. Improved HFDF, high-frequency direction finding, known to sailors as huff-duff, allowed escort vessels to pinpoint the homing signal transmissions that guided pack members to their targets. The same radio communications that made the system work became its fatal vulnerability. Centimetric radar fitted to Allied aircraft and ships by 1943 could detect the surfaced U-boat at ranges that gave the submarine no time to dive. And Ultra, the decryption of German naval enigma at Bletchley Park, allowed convoy routing to avoid patrol lines entirely. In May 1943, Black May, the Kriegsmarine lost 41 submarines in a single month. Dönitz withdrew his boats from the North Atlantic. He called it a tactical pause. It was, in practical terms, a defeat from which the Wolfpack campaign never recovered. The Rudeltaktik had sunk approximately 2,779 Allied ships across the war's duration, totaling nearly 15 million gross tons. It came closer to winning the Battle of the Atlantic than any single factor. Surviving Type 7C submarines can be examined today at the Deutsches U-Boot Museum in Cuxhaven, and most accessibly at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, where U-505, captured intact in June 1944, sits in a purpose-built pavilion that still carries, faintly, the smell of diesel and sealed metal. Return to that October night in 1942. The Ashworth is already gone. 6 more will follow before dawn breaks gray and indifferent over the heaving Atlantic. Somewhere in the darkness, 3 periscopes drop beneath the surface, and 3 captains reach for their radio sets. They are transmitting. Others are listening. Others are already moving. The Wolfpack did not win the war, but for 3 years it very nearly decided it. Dönitz understood something his enemies were slow to accept, that a weapon multiplied by coordination is not twice as dangerous. It is an order of magnitude more so. 47 ships entered the convoy. 32 reached port. The others are still out there, somewhere beneath the North Atlantic, resting at depths that no salvage operation has ever reached. Their cargo, the oil, the grain, the steel, long dissolved into the water that took them. But the tactic that put them there outlasted the war that created it. Every modern naval force in the world trains in coordinated submarine operations. Every fleet studies the Rudeltaktik. They were not the first to conceive of it. They were simply the first to make it work.